Alright, let's finish out these units. So, that is some Chaos unit. Milkwoman. Such a weird one to evaluate because it makes absolutely no sense as a 4-drop. There's literally nothing you can do with this unit basically as a 4-drop on level 4 or even 5. But it's such a god tier endgame unit. So it's like sometimes if you feel really safe, you can snag one speculatively and just bench it. Because, I mean, I'm not kidding you. It's supposedly getting fixed in future patches, but at least what I'm rating this off is what I had to experience the whole month, right? And even if you, say, have the dog that gives, this 3-cost dog here that gives it food, it doesn't even count that food because it's kind of like the flounder where it only counts your starting food, which I consider a bug, and I'm glad they're changing it, so at least in the future she'll maybe have a little bit more use on level 4. But you'll notice I'm still putting her in the A tier despite all that, because she is that good in the end game if you have a farmer build. And I've end up in farmers enough that, I'd put it this way, she's such a weird unit that it doesn't really do much good to... She's not the type of unit that a tier list does anything for. A tier list, I feel, if you're like a newer player or just looking to get different perspectives, I feel like units like the egg being S and stuff like that, or maybe the farmer being S or the tailor being S, those are gonna give you much more value than being like, oh, Milkwoman is A. I mean, if you just looked at my tier list, or you skipped around in the video and you don't read, you don't listen to what I'm saying about her, you're going to get the wrong idea with Milkwoman, right? Because you do not want to use this unit on level 4. And even 5, with the Haymaker, same problem applies. It's like you're not getting... You basically need Flounder and Haymaker for this unit to work. Once you have them, then it's time to go to the fucking... Time to go to town. It still takes like a round or two to ramp her up, but once she gets going, then she's going. Then it becomes similar to Stealth Build, where you can put any unit in front of her, and they're going to be good, but, a King Arthur or a Good Boy are going to be your 2 best hits. Sometimes a Phoenix is serviceable. Then you can also add in a Merlin to the mix to double her value and eventually quadruple it, or triple it, whatever it is. And, yeah, A tier, but with a huge asterisk around her. Heavy. I don't know. The problem is, you're obviously never using this unit in your endgame dwarf comp. You definitely have to have 2 items for it to be worth fielding. But even if you do that, it's still not even like the stats of like a Husky, for example. It's like more around a egg worth of stats. I think it's still less. Isn't it a 5/5 for each item? So it's like, yeah, it's like around an egg. But you have to field 2 items on it. But as anti-synergy with, if you're doing dwarf build through level 4, it has anti-synergy with Ori, I would say. Or whatever her name is. I think it's Ori. This unit. Because you're wanting to spread the items across units instead of doubling them up on one unit. So it's like, yeah, you may get an extra 5/5, but then you give away a 2/3. So it's just an awkward unit no matter how you look at it. I could probably argue C tier all the same, but I would like to distinguish that it's worse than Constantine. It's worse than Ori, for sure, I would say. It's the worst dwarf, definitely. But every now and then I gotta use it. If it seems like I'm stuck in dwarfs, then I gotta use it. And at least since it has 2 item slots, it can help you on the bench carrying extra items for your eventual Admiry to get extra value. But yeah, I'd be lying if I said it was anything other than underwhelming. Then the Hellhound is, I don't know, I guess. It's pretty nice in that it interacts with all evil units, not just demons. So it's not like you need a demon board for it to be a really good tempo unit. It just feels weird to put it in the same tier as Husky, though. Because definitely I don't take it as much as Husky. But it also feels weird to put it in the same tier as the 3-cost demon, because it definitely feels way better than that unit. You know, comparatively. It costs health to take, but it feels definitely worth the health to take. It's a gigantic... Like, this thing crushes everything in level 4. As long as you got a decent amount of evil units on your board. I mean, really, maybe I should be putting Husky to S is the problem here. And maybe I should. I just don't know that I feel it's an S unit anymore. I mean, I definitely take it more than the book and the... Yeah, I think I am going to have to put it to S. We'll just say it's like S-. That now it looks a little bit more sense-making, whatever, words, yeah. And here's a unit that's way too slow. It's not unusable. Like if you true you into it early, or if you get it right on 4, I guess it's serviceable, but gosh, I don't know. It's similar to the demon problem. You're sapping more stats, actually, than the demon does, and you have to sap them. I mean, you could sap less stats if you played on the edges, but then you're gaining less stats, so it's like, I don't know, what are you trying to get out of the unit? I think the unit would be better if, like, casting new you onto units was more of a big thing in this game. Like, I'm not saying it doesn't happen from time to time, but, like, compared to Storybook Brawl or Hellfire Tactics, it's not nearly the same usefulness. Like, this unit would be very useful in that scenario. But the problem is, like, between items and certain just heroes and enchantment mechanics, there's plenty of ways to scale any unit in this game, even if they have no innate scaling involved. So a unit like this horse just doesn't actually have that much use at that point. So I don't know. It's just too slow for my taste. How many turns am I going to have it in before it even gets to a Husky's level of stats, for example? The question is the entire fucking game, basically. I could maybe put an F, but I feel like it's at least maybe ever so slightly better than those. Ever so slightly. But it sure does suck, let me tell you. It sure does suck. Juliet is different than... Is it different than Romeo? It feels different. It just feels better. I don't know. Like a 9-8 for 4 is definitely better than a 5-3 for 3. I mean, it's still bad. But I don't know. It really should go the same tier as Romeo, but there's something to be said for, like, Juliet is when it comes together, so, like, you buy it, and it just kind of signifies that you have a Romeo and Juliet. I don't know. I don't know if I'm making sense here, but I don't know. Everything in me says that it should be B tier, which doesn't make any sense to me logically. But if I'm going off feeling, it feels much better than Romeo when I acquire a Juliet. When I acquire a Romeo, I'm like, ugh. When I acquire a Juliet, I'm like, oh, okay. I guess the context here is I usually have a Romeo in hand if I'm getting a Juliet. I guess design-wise, it's just better designed because I can see a Juliet and a Romeo at the same time. I can't see a Juliet when I'm level 3 outside of very specific scenarios. So I guess just maybe that's why it feels better. Like a Juliet can work a lot easier than a Romeo can. Even though they can't work without one another. That's, I guess, the conundrum. And yeah, I would say 9 times out of 10, I regret taking the mermaid here. I would say, honestly, if it were a monster, it would be better. Then there's some synergy between it and Tanuki, right? And just, if it actually could scale its attack from Tanuki, I think we could actually bump both of them up. Then they become kind of like Romeo and Juliet, where they have some actual tempo. It's way worse tempo, but at the upside of enabling some other Slay stuff later. But as it stands, it's just horrible stats, 3 attack. You're not going to kill anything at 3 attack, so you're playing down a unit, essentially, to get this thing into play, and it can still get sniped anyway from any flying unit, because 9 health isn't that much. And the Slay that it gives is only in front of it. You're at a point in the game where there's no boosting treasures, so you're not going to be able to boost the whole front row yet. You're not going to double your boost yet. I've had one game in this entire async climb where this unit actually popped off, and that was like just the most abnormal game ever. Like, I did get all the boosting treasures, and I also just had the absolute nuts with Slay stuff being found. You know, I got every Slay treasure imaginable on my way to getting the boost treasures. And it ended up popping up that one time out of, I don't know, 200 games or whatever. So that, I guess, gives it out of the F tier, because nothing in that F tier has ever popped off for me. Ever. It probably should go F, though, honestly. It is so regrettable almost all the time when I take this unit. Like, what are you doing? You're scaling some tempo units that aren't going to last anyway. I think that's the big key factor here. It goes back to the horse. It's like, why are you scaling a unit that is not going to last? How often do between 2 and 4 costs, how many of these, as we look through them, typically end up on an endgame board? Very few of them, if any. It's very few. And a 2/1 scaling on Slay, mind you, which is hard to fucking do. You know, things like Chair exists that aren't going to get slayed. It's just not going to happen. It's a horrible unit. Now, on the other end of things, amazing unit. I mean, another thing with the 4s is, like, the good 4s might not be that good in a vacuum, if I'm being honest. I think Taylor is good in a vacuum. Dandelion's probably good in a vacuum. I'm not convinced that Husky and Mudcrab are good in a vacuum. Well, they're great in a vacuum currently, but I guess what I'm trying to... I'm talking about more of an overarching balance philosophy. I guess the fact of the matter is most 4s suck ass, which makes these good, which makes the Husky and the Mudcrab good. I think regardless of 4s sucking ass or not, something like a Dandelion and a Taylor will always be good. But if 4s were just statted typically better, then something like Husky and Mudcrab aren't as good. They aren't S's, and nothing would have to change about them. That's why I'm not a huge fan that, like, Husky got nerfed and Mudcrab is getting nerfed. It's like, those feel like good 4-drops to me. It's just the fact of the matter is the rest of the 4s suck. Now, granted, you know, a lot of the bad 4s are getting buffed, so maybe it'll be fine. I just wish that they would buff them without nerfing these, because even though I'm putting them in the S, I don't feel that they are like overpowered. You know what I mean? It's like, well, okay, I can 2 for 1 if I hit 2 things with 14 health or less, but that doesn't always happen. Usually I'm just like getting a good solid 1 for 1 with the mud crab, which is fine, and the only synergy it has is enabling twig later. And that's it. Is that really something that needs to be nerfed? Like, the whole stealth package, there are things that need to be nerfed, but to me, Mudcrab wasn't it. But that's just a tangent. It'll still probably be useful, but it's similar to Husky. It's like, well, you nerf the stats, even just a little bit, and all of a sudden it's, I don't know. Like, why would I, like I said, Husky still feels kind of A tier kind of to me overall, but maybe just the rest of the force still sucks so much that it remains in the S. Because I have to rank them like based on how often I'm buying them, right? Everything in this S I am buying almost on sight, other than maybe a Dandelion. Obviously, if I didn't get stars, I'm not going to take a Dandelion, but that it's so good that it still remains in S. And then even the A's, I'm taking quite a lot, but they become a little more situational. So it's like, yeah, I mean, the stuff in the S is just like, you buy them on sight. But yeah, Mudcrab, I don't even really talk about Mudcrab. The reason it's so good is that it's stealth, so it can't get sniped other than a spell. So it's guaranteed to get its ranged hit off, which no other ranged unit is guaranteed to get its ranged hit off. So it's really good in that sense. Now, its downside is that it doesn't continue being ranged. And then also, because it's stealth, that means while it does protect itself, it exposes anything else on the row, which can be a downside sometimes. You know, if I have other ranged units, it can make them less useful because now they have a higher chance of getting sniped. Or anything else that generally just wants to attack does become less good with a fire or a crab. Oh, now we got one of the worst units in the game. Contender for worst, I would say. People are tripping that try to tell me this unit is fine. I'm like, yeah, sorry, you'll never convince me of that. Like, a 4-cost that starts as a 1/4 is so bad. Like, but then it's like, it goes back to like the, like, you know, the mage, which I can scale very easily because I'm always offered a spell in shop. Whereas Mycroft, there are a grand total of 2 units through level 4 that are going to actually allow you to scale it. A tracking dog, which you're never going to get away with fielding a tracking dog in async at the MMR I'm at level 4. Get the fuck out of here. That's never going to happen. And even the Detective's Apprentice is very underwhelming, so you're basically forcing yourself to run very shitty units to get this thing to scale. But how long, even then, how long do I have to have this thing in play before it actually gets to a reasonable attack amount? You do not have time, especially in high MMR async, for this thing to ever become a reasonable amount of attack. And yes, you can find attack increasing spells. There will be 2 of them, but by the time you're level 4, there are a ton of spells in the pool. So you're not like, you can't really bank on finding them ever. Like, you may not find any. So it's like you're spending basically most of your turn buying a 4-drop through level 4, and this is the one you're going to take. Why wouldn't I just take the mud? See, this is what it comes back down to. It's like, well, is Mudcrab good because it's OP, or is it just good because there's stuff like Mycroft Holmes to compete with, you know? Like, why wouldn't I just have a 14 attack thing rather than have to increase my hero attack 7 times to actually surpass that? You know? Does that put it into perspective, Fury? 7 times I'd have to increase my hero attack for that to even match the Mudcrab's attack? And then, yeah, past that, it'll scale up, but that just never happens. Mycroft is so bad. And you'll never be able to convince me otherwise. You're just objectively wrong if you think he's good. I'm sorry. I'm like, and I pretty much never see this unit in my opponent's boards. That's another, like, I may be off base sometimes, but when I can look at my opponent, like when people claim something's good, and I literally never fucking see it at all across the boards that I see, which are only at, once you get to 6K MMR in either sync or async, you're basically not getting, you're basically getting the same players over and over again. So if the top players are never running these comps or units and people claim to me that they're good, I have to call bullshit on it, Anyway, tangent aside, Radiant Fairy feels like probably B tier to me, maybe C tier. The problem with this unit is it's one of those units that is probably one of the highest offenders of this, where they absolutely need 100% of your focus to actually be good. The most common thing I would say is like a mage build has decent synergy with it, because your mage stuff automatically scales its attack, at least when you're casting spells, but sometimes you may want to cast your targeted spells on something different than an actual mage, and this is a great target for it. So you can get its alright, 1 second. I had to skip that song. That's just obnoxious. But, yeah, I mean, a 3-4 is horrible, right? That's a pitiful stat line, even if it is giving the stats to another unit. I also think the upgraded version isn't too good of this unit. I wish that the upgraded version did its thing twice. Maybe it's too redundant with Good Boy at that point, but my problem with the upgraded version is it's very often just better to have 2 separate ones of these than to have combined them, which feels bad. But yeah, as I was saying, it really needs 100% of your focus. You need to either have an immutable idol is an easy way to make it work, but other than that, through level 4, most likely it's spells is what you're going to have to do to scale it. I guess another option is you could put a vampiric dagger that's been statted up on it. So as long as you can do something like that, it's a pretty good unit. It's basically going to allow you to transfer its stats. I like to run it in slot 4 with a ranged or unyielding set in my backline. That way very often it is going on to a ranged or unyielding unit, the extra stats. So it gets to get its hit in, and then it gets to then give its stats to something else, which is a good deal, but the amount of resources you have to invest in it definitely limit it. And I'd say it's at the very bottom of B tier. It's definitely not like a strong pick a lot of the time. And a lot of the time I take it trying to make it work, and it's an utter fail. That's another problem with this one. You have to take a gamble on it to a certain extent. You have to make a judgment call and say, okay, this is going to work out for me. And it doesn't always happen. And that's devastating when it does, because you dedicate a lot of resources to this thing. It also is hard countered by stuff like Taylor. Mainly Taylor. We could say Celestial T, but I don't know. Realistically, Taylor is going to counter it. Sometimes a Picamorph. Rapunzel, I don't know. It should be a tempo unit, yet it fucking sucks at doing that. Supposedly it's getting buffed in the patch. Better be, because it's horrible now. I mean, it can't even get to Husky stats. But sure, it's not an F tier. I mean, at least it's not Mycroft Holmes, right? At least it's not a 1-4. But yeah, 5-6 unyielding obviously is horrible, but you can get it up to maybe realistically 15 stats sometimes. But again, compare it to Mudcrab. I can basically get it to do what a Mudcrab does, minus the stealth, minus the flexibility to place it wherever I want. I have to put it in front of 2 boosters, so slot 2 or 3 pretty much is it. I have to run 2 boosters, which through 4 is not a good deal considering that there's no 3-cost boosters, and the 4-cost boosters really aren't too good. I mean, technically Dandelion is a booster, but it's not a booster in the way that you'd think of a booster, right? It's for stars. So, I don't know. Raphael, I guess, can be okay, but... or Rapunzel, or whatever it is. But yeah, this is just a horrible unit, in my opinion. Regretful pick every time I've done it. This is a unit, though, that did grow on me a little bit. I would probably say B tier. It is an acceptable tempo unit, is what I will say. The 2 health sucks in that it can get sniped pretty easily by default. You know, even like a double Ice Storm, which isn't that outrageous to happen. Or any Fireball is likely to kill it, even if you've added some survivability. So it has that downside, very fragile in the back line there at 2 health, but it is unyielding. The stat line it gives isn't great either, so I don't know. But the unyielding portion is is okay. By the time you're to the back line, it's not the end of the world that this thing might be unyielding and in your slot 5, right? Still does need maybe some upgrades to really be okay. It's kind of a hybrid unit, like it's a booster, but it's also kind of could be a fighting unit since it is unyielding. I don't know, maybe it's C tier. I'm looking through B tier and I'm like, is it really B tier? It's probably C tier. Because the 2/4 stat line is not good enough. It, like we've mentioned, attack at pretty much all stages of the game, other than maybe the end, is always more important than health. Attack is what allows you to at least tie against people that might be rolling harder than you. Whereas if you have health, you just are going to get crushed by anyone rolling harder than you, because they're going to have, you know, they're going to cut through your units like butter. Any high roller will cut through you like butter, no matter what your health is, or the HP on your units are. And so you really only get an advantage against people that don't like have any boosts of any sort. So it's like, I don't know, it's hard to really conceptualize exactly why HP is so much less good than attack, but that's just my observation. And he kind of falls into that problem there with his boost. A 2/4 is not a great line, especially for a 4-cost unit. There has been times I've been impressed by this unit, though. So it's like, on paper it's horrible. In practice it's been okay, but not a desirable unit by any means. But I guess I could get stuck with worse. Another one, though, that when you just compare it against stuff like Husky and Mudcrab, it's like, yeah, it's not really that good. But again, if I go back to like most four suck, and it kind of falls into that, because it's like, well, my Sword Squire was a 2-drop and it gave more attack than this did. You know, it's like, can it at least give the same attack as Sword Squire, a 2-drop? I don't know. It's 2 entire levels later. It feels like it should do something like that. And this is a tough one, because Sinbad was like one of my favorite units in the pirate meta. I just it was a unit similar to Radiant Fairy, where it was like, well, it's not just going to come in and be by default good. It does take investment, but then you get to kind of do some flexible stuff with it. Obviously, mostly it's going to Pirate Monkey, but there are other things you can do with it. And now that's, in the context of level 4, it's the only thing you can do with it, because Pirate Monkey got moved to 5, which I think it should have. I do think it should have got to 5, but what I don't think should have happened is I don't think Sinbad should have been nerfed. Like, it had a fine ability. Now its ability was nerfed. You're already moving Monkey to 5. We don't need to do anything with Sinbad. But then, to top it off, Barbarossa gets removed, so pirates just get absolutely gutted. And I don't think that was a good change. moving the monkey to 5, honestly, to me, was already probably just enough. You could maybe nerf Barbarossa's stat giving ability slightly, like maybe cut it off by 25% on each portion, but removing them was horrible for the game in my opinion. You just have an entire group of units that are basically useless other than tech pieces right now, which is the pirates. Just having so many duds in the shop makes the game more RNG, right? It makes the game more RNG to have units that just literally aren't playable. And trust me, I have tried Sinbad so many times to the detriment of my frickin' win rate. It's been an utter fucking fail 100% of the time this patch. Not even close. Not even close to being usable. Horrible, horrible unit. See, Star Child, for some reason it starts with more stats than Mycroft. That's mind-boggling to me. But anyway, obviously it's way easier to scale it, which gains attack per star generated, which is like, yeah, you already probably got an S tier unit to combo with that instead of a C tier unit, or this other S tier unit. Very likely to have Puck, Dandelion, or maybe both. And then this thing's scaling out of control, and then for whatever reason it just starts with more stats than Mycroft anyway. I would say A or B. The thing is, like, it can often make it to your endgame board, but it might not necessarily stay. There are things in the star package endgame that are better than just a kind of linearly scaling ranged unit that is squishy. But it's certainly a great unit to just supplement the star thing. It's not imperative at all. Like, Dandelion is much more important. Puck is much more important. The everything else in star, it's the least important star unit other than Titania, I would say. Yet it's still A, because I don't know. Like, if I compare it to, like, Radiant Fairy or some of these others, I'm definitely taking it more. Because, like I said, you probably want to end up in stars most of the time. I mean, it turns out just having giant ranged attacks that are guaranteed to go off up to 7 times is a good thing. It does turn out that's a good thing, and something that can interact with that, even if it doesn't directly interact with it, is still good. Then tomorrow's Tailor, kind of a weird unit. It is a unit that does not fit into any build, but similar to maybe this Rapunzel's Prince or whatever, it has been okay for me at times. It's not an enticing unit to take. At the end of the day, it's an 8/8, which is not good, and it has to slay, which is not good, so it needs good real estate space, which is not good. But the actual slay effect is decent. I don't know, though. It's definitely not something you want when you're behind. It is not something that'll... I mean, I can take something like a Husky or a Mudcrab when I'm behind, and it will stop me from losing fights. I could take a Tailor when I'm behind. It'll stop me from losing fights. Tailor's not going to stop me from losing fights. If I've been losing fights, I'm going to still lose fights by adding an 8/8 to my board for 4 gold. That's the problem, you know? Hard to rank things much higher when tempo is so crazy, you know? But it's not useless. It definitely has its times that it's alright, but you generally have to be in a good spot for it to be good. It's more of like, I don't think there is such a thing as win more through certain levels, like 4. You know, I think there's just such a thing as like, can I be greedy or not? And this is a unit that if you can be greedy, it works. But it ain't going to help you come back into a game. That's the downside of it. If you're say you're Icarus, which I don't even recommend ever playing anymore, but we can use Icarus as an example where you're desperate to find some single high impact characters to add to your empty or sparse board, Tomorrow's Tailor ain't really it. You know, it's mildly more stats than a Consti at 4. Compare that to like getting a Husky. It's just night and day. You know, it's just not. It ain't it. It just falls back into the 4 cost thing. It's like, I don't know. I still think Husky and Mudcrab are just what 4s should be. Whereas these things are like barely even more stats than mediocre 3s. So. And yeah, this one. Between F or D, I don't know. Like. It technically scales worse than Parrot, but it scales itself. I don't know. It's pretty bad, but it's another one that's getting buffed. I still don't know if it's enough. The problem is, like, these Slay units, they start out with horrible stats. Again, we're talking a 10-3 for 4 here. Yeah, it's flying, but pretty easily countered by chairs, which are prevalent. Or just, not, you know, at 10 attack, it probably just doesn't kill anything a lot of the time. So to even get it going, it's like, but what mission are you accomplishing by gaining stats on this unit when it starts out at 3 health? When are you ever going to get to a point where this fucking thing can survive a hit? You're basically putting a bunch of resources into something that can at best 1-for-1. Often it won't even 1-for-1. I guess it can snipe the backline. It's just such a bad unit. This is my problem with Slay. It's like, what are you working toward? You're just working toward making a horribly statted unit have acceptable... Like I can spend all level 4 slaying. I'm never going to slay twice. You know, let's say I get the best case scenario, which is to slay 3 times through level 4. Assuming I never upgraded the unit. Okay, I went and I made a 10-3, a 13-6. Wow. 13-6, how does that compare to a Mudcrab? How does that compare to a Husky? It's horrible. 4 costs suck ass. And, but at least it's flying. That's what keeps it out of F. The only reason it's not an F is because it's flying. Now, Yuck the Yak, I gotta be honest, it sucks. There is technically situations where it could be okay. I don't think it's good with Brother Gambler because you don't want a unit that is like not ranged, not unyielding, and not just a stat stick. You don't want that on your board with Brother Gambler. Because it might just be the thing that gets your actual Brother Gambler buff. So I don't actually agree that it's good with Brother Gambler. So really the only upside here is certainly you don't want to just not spend gold. It has no synergy with the piggy bank. You know, they deleted its use from the piggy bank. So the only use it has is if you have like the Seer's ball. This, whatever, is that the treasure? I think it's this one. I don't know them by the icon, but I'm pretty sure it's that one. You know what I'm talking. Oh, this one. So this treasure or this treasure are really the only synergies for it. But if I have those treasures, I didn't take them thinking, oh, I'm gonna take them in case I get a Yuck for the Yak. I'm taking them because I'm a mage build that wants to actually use that mana. So I guess the only time it ever would be useful is if you just got it in your shop and you just upgraded a 4 and you see one of those treasures and none of the other treasures make sense. And even then it's a unit that starts out with no stats. You know, and then the first upgrade, even with all of that mana, is still not even as good as the good tempo units. So you even have to wait another round before it to even get to a good stat line. So to me, it's F tier, even if there is some theoretical worlds where it can actually pop off. Sure as hell never popped off for me, I'll tell you that. hadn't even about. This is one that used to for sure be S tier for me. I think it just goes right in there with the other cats. It feels like it should be better, but I think with how little I run actual cats on my way to 5, it's not as good anymore. Like, it was pretty good before, because it's like I may not even be running cats, but the old cat box was just such a good unit in front of boosters that you just sort of had it a lot of the time as a one-off. And in those cases, you can kind of just pop in a cat in the bottle in any general board that has that, and it will be really good. It's like, again, kind of similar to this unit. I mean, really, it's just right. All of these cats are like exactly the same to me. They're good if you have cats, they're bad if not. They're B tier because I run cats, I guess, enough to warrant a B tier. None of them are really that useful. Well, these are useful with some boosters, but in general, it does have some synergy, I guess, with... I would run it with like a Watson, if that's something I need to do. I just don't actually do that much anymore. Back in the day, I would do that a lot. I don't not do it now entirely, but I'm very often not doing it. So I don't know. It's a very good unit at what it does. And there are some rare times I can actually use it as a makeshift Phoenix in a non-cat build, if I'm desperate for something like that. You know, if I'm about to die and I'm rolled down my level 5 to 5 gold, and that's the best option available, I'll try to make it work. And sometimes it does. I mean, it does resummon with 50% of the stats, so like you could put it, maybe it is a beneficiary of like that or something. You know, there's stuff that you could do with it. It's a flexible unit, I guess, so it's okay. It can be okay to try to put it as a soft counter, 2 stars, sometimes. Oop, what? Oh, there we go. I think I go A with Crystal Maiden. It's obviously you're only taking it with mages, but I would say now that we're on 5s, I'll still give... if a 5 is generally useful, it's going to have good ratings, but even stuff that becomes pretty niche, I feel at 4... I'm less inclined to give a good rating to something if it's pretty niche, unless it's something like Dandelion that's just insane in that niche. And it's also a niche that isn't really that niche because you're basically going stars all the fucking time. But, you know, something... I think once we get to 5s, everything is essentially situational once we get to 5, and especially 6. So I'm going to mostly rate them within the context of their builds at that point. I'll still try to give a general idea of like, well, how often do I end up in that build? Like, I don't necessarily end up in mages that much, but I gotta be honest, if I am in mages, I absolutely want a Crystal Maiden. Gigantically very important to the build. You can make it work without it, but it sure is a lot easier to make it work with it. It's going to hyperscale your board. It's going to make casting easier. It's just such a pivotal unit to the mage comp. But at the end of the day, it's not ranged, it's not unyielding. It starts out with bad stats, kinda. And it's part of a comp that isn't ran a massive amount by me. But it's ran enough that I'll give it an A tier. Poor Pirate Monkey. I guess I don't know. My eyes went to Pirate Monkey, so I'm just going to do that one. I will give it a D because it has some niche uses that totally aren't related to pirates, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I don't want every comp to just be parasitic, but it is kind of funny that it's basically unusable with pirates. What it is useful is in a stealth comp or a farmer comp. That's basically the use of it. I guess it could be useful in a... No, those are pretty much it. And the idea is you put it in the 7th slot, and after everything has gained its stats, it just applies more stats to the board. You know, you don't even bench it like you would with a normal pirate build. The idea is, like, with a stealth build, you need to give it the stealth item. That's the only way it works with that. So it's pretty... I don't even rank it for the stealth build because I've literally never even really pulled that off. But the only realistic time I've pulled it off is with the farmers. And you can put it in the back slot after everything else has given its stats, like the flounder in particular. And then it'll give even more stats to the board, and it's pretty good in that scenario. But it's so niche that it's like D minus minus, let's put it that way. It's pretty bad. It's sad because it would be good if it'd be fine as a 5-drop if Barbarossa still existed and if Sinbad wasn't nerfed. I would love to see how the game looks with that. With Sinbad unnerfed, I could acceptably use it. It would be very similar to a Radiant Fairy in terms of value. Probably a little better. Through 4, and then once I hit 5, I could hit the monkey, and then I'd have a build going. But with only it giving 100 stats instead of 150 it used to, it's quite bad. Sinbad, yeah. Yeah, monkey's no good now though. Just has some niche uses. Watson's a tough one because, like, it has had some nerfs which are justified. It's very easy to snipe this unit because of its low health, and it doesn't give its persisting buff anymore past death, which is probably fine. It would still be an S tier unit if hunters were good. I'm not saying hunters are unusable. Like, I did use them every now and then. Their main strength is that they're just a shittier version of stars. So they will help you tie, but you have to have the right hero for it is the problem. Whereas stars work with everything and are just more powerful. And don't take as long to ramp up as hero attack does. But all those things considered, Watson is the best at what it does. It also, boost comp used to be a thing, and this was a great piece of boost comp. I mean, honestly, as I read all that off, it probably is B tier now. It only just does its most basic function, which is a dedicated hunter build, and sometimes it can just stall you out if you're a 3 attack or more hero, which there aren't many of these days. And honestly, not many of that you would want to pick. Like, I'm not wanting to pick an Aladdin in async. That's a death wish. But yeah, I mean, what is there to the unit? You put resummoning stuff in front of it. You hope to find some boosting treasures, and you hope it doesn't get sniped, and you get your hero attack. It does what it does, and it does it well. It's meta dependent though. Frankenstein's monster is a F. Again, if it was so good, I would see it ever used by these opponents, and it's not. And I have tried it every now and then. It just is so bad. It needs to have so many more stats than it currently has for it to be good. Nope. Yeah, I'm going back to that first song. Okay. What were we talking about? Gretel. Gretel is the best of the... I don't know. Both Gretel and Watson are the best that Hunter has to offer. And that's always been the case, I would say. Other than maybe Van Helsing's old form. Still don't think he needed to be nerfed. Just because noobs can't figure out how to break a tie, I don't think we should nerf units over that, but I guess because noobs can't figure out how to break a tie, it had to be nerfed. Not a fan of that one. I mean, it just made... It invalidated like 3 or 4 treasures. It invalidated a bunch of just usefulness to like certain play paths, I feel. It's Van Helsing isn't a completely unusable unit. I guess we'll get to that when we get to it, but it's just such a much more boring unit now, and definitely not as good. And to me, the Van Helsing nerf is the biggest thing. I mean, hunters have been nerfed left and right. You know, Gretel used to be ranged. I do agree changing it to unyielding is good. It should not have been ranged. It should have been a 6 if it was going to be ranged. Watson used to be unyielding and persist the stuff on death. I think losing both of those makes sense. Van Helsing nerf doesn't make sense to me. I would even say the tracking dog nerf doesn't make sense to me. But I digress. That's just like all of these things together, while other things have been getting buffed, makes hunters continually not be as good in my eyes. So while Gretel is a very good unit for hunters, I don't know that it's better than Watson. I have to rank them about the same, so they're either both B or they're both A. They're definitely not C. I think they're both B. They feel right there with just the unenticing builds. It's like, yeah, I can win with Hunter, I can win with Cat. They're not going to be my first, second, or third choice. They're only happening if I am forced into them because I'm about to die and they're the only thing in the shop. And I know that there's something that I can stabilize with and hopefully pull something out with. But they are not going to consistently get you first, I can tell you that right now. Not in async. Not in high-level async. Yeah. Haymaker is S. Sometimes it isn't amazing, to be honest, but not enough for me to not put it in S because there aren't that many 5s that are just sort of generally good, but Haymaker is. Haymaker gives you a 5/3 to your entire board on entrance, so no way it can get scammed out of that. And it also persists food stats, which opens up quite a lot in the game. She is very important. She's similar to Crystal Maiden in that she's absolutely important for her specific builds. You can't do her builds without her. Yet, even when you're not running her build, she is good for your board and now opens you up to her builds if you had nothing in them before. Like I mentioned in the other video, I had a game recently where I was full mage, and all it took was me seeing a Haymaker and one of these in a shop for me to just, take the Haymaker. I didn't run this, but now I got a unit that just helps my board. And then if I find Flounder early enough, that's reason for me to go to that, and that's what happened, It's very easy to have a Haymaker allow you to pivot to something else. Also, back when Nero was really good, she was great for that, And again, Nero's not unusable now, but it's kind of on the level of Hunter and Cats for me is the dog build, I would say. Not my first, second, third, fourth, or fifth choice, but it's usable. Hermes. I don't know. People claim this is good now, and I will say every now and then I see it. I've won with it. I do find it good with Artemis, I'll put that. I think it's good with Artemis. Other than that, I don't like it. I've been trolled down the fucking slave routes too many times. Now, apparently this unit has been buffed in beta and is pretty good now. I can see that. Unlike this unit, gosh, even just saying that makes me think either this needs to go to F or this needs to go to C. There's definitely no way this is going to C, so sorry, this is going to F. But yeah, this is going to D. Like I said, there is one hero that I think just generally is good with it. I think you don't even need a slay build for it to be okay with Artemis. But if you do have a slay build, this is like your cornerstone unit, I guess. It's one of them. You need problem with slay is you need every single moving part. It's not like the hunter pivot where it's like this unit is just good. This unit's not just good, but it's a unit you have to have. And then you get the flounder, and then boom, you're going. With the sleigh build, it's like, I need more than 3 units. I need like fucking a whole board of sleigh pieces. I need my opponents to be weak. I need my RNG to allow me to slay. I need the right treasures, and maybe when all that's said and done, I can actually compete with a farmer build. So it's like, yeah, sometimes it'll work, but oh my gosh, 99 times out of 100 it won't. And you lose in such spectacular. Like I said, I did run my numbers to a certain extent, trying to say, how did my comps fare? And Slay had by far the lowest win rate of anything I significantly tried to run. Like, the average placement was, I don't know, it was like 5 or 6. With Slay, it was abysmal. So you can't convince me that Slay is good. But maybe with all of these buffs, it'll be okay. But yeah, it's just out of F because it does have a unique effect, being able to fight before the thing starts. And if you can somehow get it going, if you can somehow get its stats up and then add it flying, it is pretty devastating to quite a lot of boards. So there is upside with Hermes, but I wouldn't recommend people to really pick it that often. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I mean, this has to go A at least. The problem is I'm very rarely picking it because, like I said, I'm not really in demons typically at that point in the game, but and even less so than mages, I would say. Even though I consider Demon Scam to be much stronger than mages as an endgame comp, I just don't end up in demons as much as mages for whatever reason. It might just be that mages are fun to play. They're honestly one of the most fun thing to play, in my opinion, whereas demons aren't. They're very boring. But, you know, for what it's worth, this is a very important unit. Not even to your end game. I mean, honestly, if you can make it to the end game without a demon build and still put a scam build together. But I guess my thing is, if you're in a relatively full demon board, you kind of need this unit to survive level 5, in my experience. If your opponents are doing the typical async shit of high rolling their ass off at that point in the game, you need the giant amount of stats that this gives. And if you don't have them, you're just fucking taking 10 to 15 damage each round. I ain't kidding you. Because your demons will get 2 or 3 for 1 all the way across the board. Like, you basically double the strength of your board when you find one of these as a demon board through level 5. So it is very important for that. I could even argue S for it. But I think it comes down to the lack of frequency that I run demons that would keep it out of S, I guess. It's also not really something I can pivot into. You know? I feel like S also needs general use. This thing's only useful with demons. It's not like it helps evil characters. Lady of the Lake is removed from the game, which I suppose is fine, though I kind of wish that boost comp was still viable. It really isn't that viable anymore. It's on the level of Slay, maybe. Matt is a very weird one for me to rank in async, because, like I said, stealth can work, but you just can't take Matt along the way. I don't know. It's just a horrible tempo unit for 5. Like, yeah, it is a 12 attack ranged, but, I mean, compare it to Mudcrab. It's just a worse version of Mudcrab at 5. And through level 5, giving stealth to something on the left is rarely going to do much. It's probably at its best with something like the Tailor. So it's a unit that you take a giant tempo hit through level 5, which, as I said, is typically absolutely insane in high level async. I mean, often you're facing level 6 boards with Golden King at that point. So I don't know. This is a unit that would probably the one that would flip the most if I were ranking sync versus async. So for async, I rank it D, but in sync, I would say it's like A or S, because it's so pivotal to the stealth comp, which is absolutely the best thing to run in sync if you want consistent wins. If you look at any of the top people this season, they just spammed stealth over and over and over and over again, which thankfully in async you can't do. Even your opponents won't be stealth that often. Once in a blue moon you'll see it. So, you know, as frustrating as async is, I did find it better than sync to play. And yeah, this is a very unique unit. I don't know. Obviously, it's horrible tempo. It doesn't fit into any build, but it gets you a treasure. I guess the problem is I don't find that... I would rank this maybe higher in very recent patches, but not the most recent patch, because I don't find 5-cost treasures are in a good spot right now. You know, just a few patches ago, you had like this was a 5, this was a 5, trying to think if there's any others that really stand out. This wasn't a 5. I think this is a shit move to make this a 5. I don't think I've ever taken this on 5 now. I know some people do. I really don't think it's a good 5. It was perfectly balanced as a 4. I don't know why that needed to change. Not that stars need any buff, but that wasn't really stars, was it? In my opinion, that's its own unique build. That's like cats. It made cats better, is what it did. But yeah, even just the ones I named off here. I mean, this is an incredible treasure. I think this was also a 5, and this is also an incredible treasure. So like, several incredible treasures got moved to 6, and then one non-incredible treasure. I know a lot of people will disagree with me with that, but I say it's a pretty not incredible treasure in a general sense. Even with stars being prevalent, I think it's pretty not incredible. So I just don't think 5 is that... Really the only enticing thing to me now at 5 is this, and sometimes this. This, though, is mainly for fluffs. That's what I would say. And that's it. And then this one. This is a pretty good one. The others are all just middling or horrible, I would say. I mean, you know, Philosopher's Stone's okay. I don't think it's amazing. It can be good. What were we talking about, though? Oh, yeah, Narcissus. So Narcissus, it just depends on if 5-cost treasures are worth it. Is it worth spending all this money to get 0 board presence to get a treasure? Well, back in the day, definitely. Right now, I'm not so certain. It feels like a C tier, I would say, right now. Yeah. I mean, this is similar to Narcissus, I would say. To me, it's a horribly statted 5-cost unit that has... you know, and I'm assuming here that the bug is fixed, which it will be, where if you put a stealth or a slay item on it, you can actually proc it immediately. In the context of that, it can be okay. But I'm assuming that that's an exploit, I guess, but maybe not. Either way, as an actual unit, I don't think it's very good. You can get it to big stats, but a Hermes is way better at doing that, in my opinion. And Hermes is also better at facilitating a woman in the moon, So really, it's just a unit to get a treasure, in my opinion. And if 5-cost treasures aren't that good, then I don't think Klek Norris is that good. I've been very disappointed in it. It's a huge tempo hit to take this unit, and if you brick your 5, which you're likely to, then you're probably dead. But not unusable, still in D. Yeah, you'll notice a theme here with the Ds. Now, maybe I'm being too harsh on Nocturne, but I feel like I get trolled into Nocturne way too often, and I don't want to, like... I think it's almost always a mistake to take this. A 1-2 per sleigh, it really isn't that good. The star effect technically isn't that good, but I will say there is every now and then a time where you get the star 3-cost treasure. This one, Star Catcher, where you can basically have a sleigh build with a dandelion that actually can scale the Nocturne. So then you can run something like a Tailor slot 1 that's guaranteed to slay as long as it attacks. And then you run like the Nocturnes up in the front, in front of dandelions, and they'll actually scale decently fast. But in my opinion, it goes back to, like, I don't have time in async to actually make that work. I've tried it. I think it works in sync. I don't think it really works at high level async. It's just too slow. If you can somehow get it going, then yeah, it'll work, but there's just so many ways it can go wrong. And you only have so much HP to pay. Because when you run something like this, it doesn't have much stats initially. Something like this, it doesn't have much stats initially. And you're running it all up front, and with stuff that doesn't have much stats in the back. If you do lose, you will lose spectacularly, which is to say you will lose around 15 HP worth of health. So it's like, this is why Slay sucks. That's what Slay boils down to on any Slay build, in my opinion. Everything has such bad stats initially that you run into the wrong motherfucker when you're trying to put this together, and you don't gain anything that turn other than you lose 15 health. And you're either dead or you're in your death waiting room at that point. There's nothing you can do to pivot out of it. You've sacrificed everything to try to get this Slay build to work, and it's just not happening. I think Nocturne sucks ass. He's had moments of greatness. And Corgi's very meta-dependent. I think right now in this particular patch, he's a D. In past patches, he was like an A. In the most recent patch before this, he was an A. You can see my videos. I ran him all the time. But unfortunately, because both Boost and Nero got gutted, basically, I don't think people give enough credit for how bad Nero actually got nerfed. Like, he almost got half of his stats that he gives nerfed. It's a pretty big nerf. Like I said, he's not unusable, but why would I do that now when all of these other builds give so many more stats? So you need either Boost or Nero to be good for Corgi to be good, in my opinion. Sure, there's some other times where Corgi can do stuff, but in my experience, it's far and few between, which is unfortunate. It's a very interesting unit to me, but right now it's just not that usable, in async at least. Now, not a unit that's generally useful, and there's obviously no longer the aura symbol of unity or whatever, no longer really works with it, but yet still I find that this unit is like, this is the thing that lets you know, can I go puffs or not? I basically need to have had some puffs around, but until you find a purple puff, you're not really a puff build. You need the purple buff. It is the cornerstone of the puff build. You know, you can have blue puff. It doesn't matter without a purple puff, in my opinion. You know, you have the purple puff, and then you can get Merlin, then you can get purple puff, and then they'll pop off. Without the purple puff, they're not going to pop off. You can have a whole board of green and red puffs. It isn't going to matter. Without a purple puff, it ain't going to matter. It's unyielding, so it actually, you know, often 2-for-1s, even very large boards, sometimes more, 3-for-1 sometimes. It facilitates everything with the puffs. Even though it lost this interaction, it's still S tier in my eyes in the context of a puff build, which happen often enough in async, even at high level MMR, that it's an S tier unit in my eyes. Then we got another one of these sleigh pieces of shit. It's just the same story with all these sleigh units, and I don't know that there's much more for me to say about it. It technically can help out a puff build, but I rarely take it in that. I'm not going to take it speculatively with puffs. It's just not worth my gold to do that. I would have to have my blue puff already and have no Merlin and be low on gold and see this in the shop for me to take it. Let's put it that way. And have a reasonable use case for putting it on the board. But in an actual sleigh build, it's obviously an important piece to the puzzle, but it just sucks. It used to be amazing when it was a boost unit. Oh yeah, and this, I don't know, it's a tempo unit that doesn't give good tempo. When I'm very desperate, I guess it works if it's in a shop and it's the only 5 and over something like that, I guess. But yeah, it's like, it just doesn't even give remotely enough stats. I mean, it doesn't even total the amount of stats that a Husky gives. Even the nerfed version, if you assume that it gives the stats to the left and the right, I think it just about matches the stats. And yeah, it's unyielding, but it's a 10 attack unyielding unit, and it has no synergy, really. I mean, I guess the synergy is it could buff something mildly. That's really nothing for a 5 cost. I wonder if this was a 4 cost and nothing changed about it. If everything remained the same on it, would it even be S tier? Probably. It probably would. But doesn't that kind of put it in perspective that I don't even know if it's an S tier? Because honestly, most of these D tiers, if they were a 4 cost and nothing changed, they would be S tier. I mean, Hermes would be S tier, I think. Cluck would definitely be S tier. Matt wouldn't. Maybe it would. I mean, if a crab is S tier, this is probably S tier. Nocturne is probably S tier. Being able to get it as early as 4, 8-10 stat line, scale everything, sure. I don't even know that this is S tier. So I don't know, I'm almost tempted to put it to F. It's really fucking bad. But I'll leave it in D because it's pulled me from... It has a few comeback mechanics, I guess, for like a round or two. 1 second. Alright. Yeah, that thing. Now, this unit for sure used to be S. I think it's still okay. It falls into the line of these nerfed units that aren't necessarily in meta. Though, if I were to rank dwarfs, I would definitely rank them above hunters, cats. But, like I said, levels 4 and 5 often suck for dwarfs. And the thing about Blacksmith is it was like on the level of Haymaker in its prior form. And trust me, I believe it did need to be nerfed. It was a ridiculous 5-drop. But I guess what I'm saying is you didn't have to run dwarfs in the olden days. All you would need to do is see a blacksmith take it because it's just good on its own, and then now you pivot to dwarfs. You can't really do that now because it's not a good enough unit. It's interesting because like a lot of the times they'll take a ranged unit and make it unyielding. You know, they did that with this unit. They did that with this unit. With this one, they just straight up removed it all. I do wonder if maybe unyielding would be reasonable. The thing is, they gave unyielding to Tempe, so I guess it's weirder when you split your value between two units like that, I think, because can I really expect to be running a Tempe and a Blacksmith most of the time when I'm going through 5? I find it pretty hard to rely on builds that need 2 units. It's another thing about Hunters. It's like, I don't necessarily need Gretel through 5. I just need it by 6. I only need Watson if I'm doing Hunters, and that's always been the case. I can find Gretel later. Whereas with the dwarves, now I can't find one without the other and expect to be strong. Blacksmith is not strong on its own. Tempe is not strong on its own. That's the problem, I think, with the 5-cost dwarves. But you know what? I am absolutely fine with the power level that dwarfs are at right now. They're not unviable, and they're even relatively... I mean, I have plenty of wins to my name with dwarfs in async, and sync for that matter. I don't think there's a much more unfun comp for me to play against than dwarfs personally. So any time that they are meta prevalent is the miserable time for me. It's just not fun to run into a dwarf on the wrong turn, basically right on 6 or 6.1 or whatever, and take 15 to 20 damage of your HP. It's just not fun. Especially when to be honest, it's just the most brain dead comp that there is, in my opinion, as well. Like, there's just no nuance to dwarf. There's nothing to think about with positioning. There's nothing to think about with how do I navigate my way through it. It's just, do I find the stuff and what items show up? There's just no nuance to it. So I'm fine with dwarfs in their current state. But for what it's worth, I think Blacksmith probably just falls around B tier currently. It still is like an important part of dwarfs. Like, if you want your multi to pop off, and especially if you didn't find vampire daggers, that's your only option, right? Starchild. I begrudgingly give it an S, because it's just, for whatever, it's similar to the, well, it's probably the most unfun unit for me to play, both as and against, because you have to hold a gold, which is so annoying. It's just like, just doesn't feel good to do that. But then also, it's just, I don't know, these giant stars simply have this, a dandelion, bonus points if you can somehow also add some stats to it, either with spells or treasure, hero, item, whatever. And it immediately just clears out every board, every reasonable board, other than the most high roll stuff. It's just such a stupid unit, actually. I don't know that I like it when something like Oberon already exists. Though I do think that every tribe should have a 5. That's a big problem with angels, in my opinion. I really think they need to move Angelic Commander to a 5. I don't know what you do with the whole... I kind of wonder if they had just made Dandelion a 5 and removed Starchild from the game. That could have been reasonable, in my opinion. Then you still have... what is the Stargirl? Stargirl wouldn't be as good as a 4 is the problem. It would still be usable because of Puck. I feel like you could revert Puck to the old version, though, in that scenario. But whatever, we're just spitballing here. Long story short, Starchild S. Ridiculous unit. Absolutely ridiculous unit. It's your only way to have consistency in async in a lot of cases. If you can't beat them, join them, pretty much. Succubus is probably one of the units that I should have bought and don't buy. Probably the biggest culprit of it. I don't know, maybe it's S. If Taylor is S, I wouldn't imagine why. Succubus does have some downside. It's like, it doesn't work against barrier, which is annoying. So a lot of times I do want to run Succubus up front. Because I want to like get one of those big units to just immediately get out of the fight. However, if they then get the level 7 treasure, you know, right as I do that, which happens more often than you think, then it sucks. Or if they're running one of these, which again, I can't always scout it, because sometimes they're putting it in on boards that didn't have it before. Then the alternative is I don't run it front line and I run it in the back line, which is generally good, but also runs into the problem of, well, unlike Taylor, which again is a lower cost unit that doesn't cost mana, when it gets down to the one-on-one, Succubus loses. So I think Taylor's definitely better. I think you could flip their cost and I'd still rank them this way. But hard to say that Succubus is a bad unit. You know, you can so often 2-for-1 with it simply by buying the unit with nothing else, no other consideration for what your build is. You know, this is not a demon really. This fits into anything. Just a very good tech piece. Unlike this one, which I have really just come to hate. The Try My Net unit, which is weird because I think people generally think this unit is fine, and it blows my mind that they think that. Technically, it's a tech piece in most senses of the word, but I don't know. I think I mentioned it in another video, but it was like the equivalent 5-drop in Storybook Brawl would just kill the unit that attacked it. Why can't this do the same? Like, especially when there's so many ranged and unyielding units in this game. It just seems like this unit sucks. Like, the best it can ever hope for is a 1-for-1, and it almost never gets that. The best it does is it just reduces the health on a ranged unit. Because most of the time it's a ranged unit in slot 1 or whatever. I guess the best case scenario is you're in the stealth mirror matchup, which again in async isn't really a thing. But in sync, I guess it could be better. Because if you're in the stealth mirror and you run it unstealthed, it forces the enemy fire mage to hit the edge and also die. As long as it's not Artemis. So, I mean, it has its uses, that's why I'm leaving it in D, but in my experience, especially in sync, it's pretty bad. And it shouldn't be, because in sync you can really manipulate your opponent because they're not like playing into you, right? But even then it sucks. It just almost never 1-for-1s. I mean, it has to get attacked, so without stealth you're not even guaranteed that happens. Sometimes it just attacks before it ever gets attacked, similar to the Fool. So, the odds are not in your favor. It's like such a desperate move, in my opinion, to run Try My Net. And it doesn't build into anything other than scam. It's okay on a scam board. But that's the best it'll ever be, in my opinion, is just okay. Which certainly doesn't feel good. What else we got? Tempe. I mean, there was that one game I used it as a mage, but that's the only time it ever happened. So it's, I guess, cool that they moved it to be a mage, but I don't find that to be that relevant. And, yeah, it got unyielding. It's just tough, because what are you doing on 5 if you didn't get a vampiric dagger of some sort, to have this thing be impactful. It's a chicken egg scenario. It's like you basically need to have had Blacksmith running for several rounds, which they're the same cost unit, so that's not likely. I often find that if I don't have a vampiric dagger, then very hard to do dwarves on 5. You know, even if you find them, it's like, ugh. What are you going to do? The Tempe just doesn't really bang until you finally get some actual stats on your items. Not many items just inherently have a lot of stats on 5. You know, maybe I get a 7 attack or something, unit, which costs a ton of gold, by the way. You know, I had to spend quite a lot of resources to make Tempe just good, and if I haven't done the whole vampiric dagger thing, so. But I will say, if you did do the vampiric dagger thing, then Tempe bangs. Carries a ton of items. Eventually, you can transfer blacksmith items to him. And then once you get a multi, this thing grows to very large levels, and it's unyielding. So, like, it is good, but it certainly ain't great. And I generally still think the blacksmith is more useful to find on 5. But all that being said, it has its uses. This is unfortunate. I do think that Uther, for me, is F tier. I think they could probably give back unyielding now that boost has been gutted, and maybe it would find some use. Either that or just revert it entirely to its old former self, where it can also just die in the front and preserve its aura. Which to me is how the text kind of reads to a certain extent. It's kind of weird. I mean, the unit is just weird in general. Maybe the unit just doesn't need to be in the game anymore, if I'm being honest. It doesn't seem like... Anytime something with Uther has been powerful, it immediately gets nerfed. I mean, think how long stealth has gone without actually getting nerfed, when it's been the most egregious thing in this history of this game. But every time that Uther has been powerful, it gets nerfed pretty quickly. So I kind of think it should just get deleted, because it seems like nobody actually wants its effect to do what it's supposed to do. He's just so easy to... I don't know. There's not much upside with him these days, I don't think. He's technically not unusable, but I don't know. He's a horrible... Maybe if they made him okay tempo, if they boosted his actual stats or boosted his actual boosting stats, maybe he's okay. He needs to actually be something I can just take on 5 and play, though. Like, how am I going to put together a boost comp in this meta? I mean, there's the Star Child stuff, but I'm just going to end up in stars then. And I will do a proper star build, not just like a boost star build. So it's just like wasting resources on something, I feel. So I don't know. It's not the best. And it's pretty bad, in fact. Alright, have I missed anything along the way? I feel like there are stuff that wasn't here, but I can't think of it. We're on to finally the 6s here. So Admir is definitely S. And this unit has been nerfed several times, unlike the other units that get nerfed. Well, it's not necessarily true. I mean, Husky got nerfed and it's still an S, but I feel like it's bottom S. Admir is like still top of S, I feel. Just an absolutely ridiculous unit. And the main reason for, it feels great to have, feels horrible to play against. It's the main reason for taking 15 to 20 damage, because it's like the difference in your board from the moment you don't have an Admiry to the first moment you do have an Admiry is fucking astounding. Probably more so than any other power spike in the game. Your whole board's power quintuples. That might be underselling it. If you just think as a whole, how many overall stats you have, I think they quintuple typically when you get a fucking Admiry. So like I said, if somehow you make it through the lackluster level 5 of dwarfs, you're going to fucking destroy if you can survive that. Which is not all that different from Fluffs, I guess. I just feel like Fluffs has a little easier of a time because they didn't have to... Like, Fluffs can run hybrid builds, whereas dwarfs maybe aren't as good as that. Typically. You can. You have to. There's no way you're going to get through async going pure dwarfs all the way to 6. That's just not going to happen. But either way, Admery, just freaking broken unit. Love to have it, hate to go against it. Angelic Commander. It's a shame because, like, this unit has been nerfed so many fucking times. Similar to Uther, I think. It just seems that nobody wants this unit to actually do what it's supposed to do. You know, they don't want to let this unit just get out of control, which to me is like... It's hard enough to get stats on, like, your angels and shit. I mean, think about, even in the old days, pre all of these nerfs, you were never going to beat dwarfs or fluffs as angels. You were never going to scale to be able to get one slay there. Even after all is said and done. So it's like, it's already hard countered by so much stuff in the game. But then because everyone was spamming cats mindlessly, this is my theory, that they would see this and be like, oh man, I can't get my free cat win. Something hard countered me. And then they complained and complained and complained until this unit is just nerfed into the fucking ground. And it's just useless now, in my opinion. Having only the starting stats happen on Slay, as we've determined, Slay is a pretty fucking hard thing to do, especially on level 6 with a board that wasn't allowed to have 5s. You know? So I say move Angelic Commander to 5, and maybe Angels is okay. And here's the thing, I have lost to Angels before, but it's not because of this unit. It's because of this unit. This unit had jack fuck all to do with that. So, I don't know. In my opinion, it was meant to counter, like, summoning builds, but it's not even allowed to do that, because Cats just beats Angels still, typically. Definitely an F-tier unit. I don't know. Doesn't seem good to me. This unit, on the other hand, as bad as Angels are, is the best Angel. I mean, it's ridiculously good. And I'm not saying that you don't run Angelic Commander in an Angel build. Obviously you do. But, like, you had one or the other. It's just night and day that this is the better unit. You resummon your units a ton. If you can somehow pair, you know, get, like, Infinity, which is a shitty treasure, but if you can somehow survive long enough for it to have a bunch of procs, then you can maybe do some crazy stuff with Angels. But yeah, this is a ridiculous unit. And also, it's worth mentioning, when Fortuna gets this as the 6, I've never had the pleasure of getting it. At least not recently. Maybe I had it back in the day and I forgot about it, but I've never had the pleasure of getting this, but I've played against it in async. It seems like 75% of the time I face a Fortuna, honestly, they get this unit. And it is a nightmare. You will take 15 damage. And it sucks. You'll never beat a Fortuna unless you somehow snipe this unit backline. So, yeah, getting this unit ahead of curve is ridiculous. And this is, I guess, the equivalent demon of that. But I rank this one S just simply because, like I said, Angels is not something I want to be going, whereas Scam is, and this is like 100% needed for Scam, in my opinion. Yes, there are some random boards where you can have enough evil units die for a Arc Demon scam to work, but those are far and few in between. The most straightforward way to enable Dr. Frankenstein is this unit. And like I said, a lot of times the way to get there is full demons, but there are times when you can have a board that is like mages, for example, or something that is mainly evil units that wasn't demons. And all you have to do is find this, and now this is the pivot unit. It's the pivot unit isn't actually Frankenstein for a Frankenstein build. This unit here is actually the pivot unit, because Frankenstein's pretty lackluster without this. You'll maybe summon 3 units tops, but if you have this, you're going to resummon your entire fucking board. So this is an S tier unit for sure. And here's the thing. The earlier you get it, the better. Similar to this, if you get it from Fortuna, I have gotten this from Fortuna, or at least I've like finagled my way into it through like kissing a worse unit into that. And it's God tier, ahead of curve, and even on curve it's God tier. Very, very good unit. Used to be worse when you would die when you're at 1 health, and alright, yeah, when you're at 1 health and it would kill you, it was worse, but now that doesn't happen, it's better. Now this is not really a unit. S tier spell. Blackbeard realistically probably should be a D, because it does actually have a realistic use case in a fluff game, as it's like the actual Exodia at the end is to field Blackbeard while you put fluffs on the bench. You know, you can just fill your bench with some cheap fluffs, and then your Blackbeard will be gigantic, and you can get multiple of them. But that's not enough for me. The problem is I've never had a game that needed to go that late. Async is just too fast, typically. So realistically, it's just a fucking horrible unit. It's a complete dud for Fortuna. It's a complete dud in your shop. Oh, how I wish this was the unit that was removed instead of Barbarossa. I really do miss Barbarossa. I thought it was a fun unit. If it needed to be nerfed, nerf it. Don't just delete the unit. And Captain Hook is a unit that is good when Barbarossa exists. Otherwise, it's not. Theoretically, you could maybe make it work, but I every time I've tried to make this unit work, you know, I've also gotten this one off Fortuna. It is abysmally bad. As bad as Slay. I mean, Pirates is worse than Slay in its current state. This is a really old unit. And this unit I'm fine with getting removed. This is just like a weird unit, but this unit was so... I don't know. They should not have removed that unit. And this is a unit I still say that the weight is somehow screwed up on it on the back end, because I've never seen a 6-drop that is harder to find than this one. But yeah, if you're in a cat build, you either have this or you don't. If you don't, you're not going to win. Except for one rare case where I combined a Mana Catalyst with both of the mana-giving treasures. That was the only time I could make cats work without a cat queen, but results not typical. You definitely need cat queen. It's the absolute end-all, be-all of the cat build. I can get by without the cat cabinet. I absolutely have to have cat queen if I want a cat build to work. And it's very strong, even with the nerf. Where are we? Celestial Tea. Yeah, I don't know. It's a little bit better in async than sync, I would say, because the enemy can't react to it. It's still pretty fucking bad, though, as a 6-cost unit. This unit, to me, I still have to wonder how Taylor's a 4 and this is a 6. I mean, I don't know. I think that it's not unusable, as I said. I've used it to win here and there, but it's only really reliable if you're using it slot 1 as either a flying unit to take out like to take out like a wall comp or something, which just never happens in async. I'm trying to think of like good examples. I guess the only time it's that useful in async is like I can scam some cats or angels out of a resummoner or a wolf or a duelist. That's probably the best use case in async, in all honesty, because a lot of I guess there's not really that often like backliners. I need the pig, but yeah, for a 6 cost tech unit is a lot of money to spend for a tech unit. It has horrible stats. And it's not like it reduces the enemy stats. It also has one of the worst upgrades in the game. Upgrading this unit basically does nothing. I think it's a pretty bad unit all around, but I do like that it exists. I just wish that it was either cheaper or kind of did some level of reducing stats, even if it wasn't as ridiculous as the Tailor. Like, at least maybe the upgraded version could reduce our stats by 50 or something. Like, just throw this unit a bone to a certain degree. But yeah, I'm also mind blown that some people say that this unit was OP. It's like, huh? I have had games, especially in sync, because it's like your opponent can still play around your T. Like, it's just like and it also makes Frankenstein worse, because you obviously don't want that coming out of your Frankenstein. I don't know, I think it's pretty bad, but I'll leave it at D, because I have won games because of it. Even though I'm tempted to still put this S, but I'm trying to think, if I put the Cat Queen S, shouldn't I put this S as well? I probably run Cat Queen in async more than I run the Treant. But the Treant is better, technically, comparing the two. So it's like, even though I don't run stealth as much, it still does get ran from time to time. And if it does run, you're not going to make it work without Treant, similar to the cat. But it's also just ridiculously powerful. You know, there's completely... you can make any unit into a giant unit without much difficulty. But honestly, not that good of... maybe I don't put it in S, because it is honestly not ran that often in async. I think Frank has to be S. I run Scam decently often in async. In sync as well. I think it's just... It's always going to be an okay comp. Especially when nothing else is coming together, or if it looks like people are just running a lot of like dwarfs and fluffs and stuff. It's actually not good in sync right now, I would say, because of the prevalence of Fire Mage Stealth. So probably like A or B tier, but in async, I think it's perfectly fine. Also, like, your opponent can't play around it, so you kind of have a lot of freedom there to just put it in the most ideal spot. But Scam, I think, is pretty good. Maybe like an A tier comp. I still think Fire Mage... I'll tell you what, I'll knock this down. I definitely run the cat more than I run this. The Fire Mage I can actually run in mages, but in mages it's not going to grow that big. And so really it's just stealth and mages. More likely it's going to be ran in mages. I think it all averages out to like an A tier. It's a very powerful unit, but sometimes it is too slow to actually scale up as an actual mage. So for that reason, I don't know that I put it in the S, even though it is such a ridiculous unit. Certainly in sync, it's a fucking S for sure. I think I'm going S with the blue puff. Purple is better, But blue is just as important. It's just the chicken here. I don't know what the chicken or the egg is, but whichever one came first is this one. So whatever the chicken or the egg is, this is the chicken and the egg, and this is, I guess, the rooster come to crow or some shit. I don't know. I don't know what the saying will be, but yeah, I mean, it's just not much to say about it. It's just very important to be able to use with scaling your fluffs. Can't do it without it. Fluff build won't work without it. Good boy. I think good boy will always be an S in this game unless good boy itself gets changed. I think there's just too many damn ways. There's too many ways that this can be good. I have used good boy in probably 4 different meta comps over the course of this game. It's kind of funny. It's probably the most flexible unit in the game other than Merlin in that regard. Right now, it's most likely to be used in a farmer comp, which is not necessarily that different from the previous patch. It's just it would be used in a dog comp before. But now it's mainly used in a farmer comp. The thing is that the targets it's going to hit typically is this unit, and then down here we haven't ranked them yet, but this unit and this unit. And this unit. All of them are good. All of them fit into the comp perfectly. All of them are desirable. So good boy just absolutely it's just a great unit to have. Also, it fits into soup comps. Every now and then you just don't get a meta comp and you're running soup. And if you have like a piece of infinity or something early, say from a Fisher King or whatnot, then you're sitting pretty well. Just sort of scaling the good boy through normal means. Even a mage comp I can make useful with it. Sometimes I'm running like a double Merlin, and then I just take a good boy as my thing to target my scaling with. Very flexible, very good unit. I guess that's why it's called good boy. Herding Dog's a little sad now. It was an S tier unit in the most previous patch, but now I don't know. What I will say about it is maybe it's still okay, but it just is not on my high list of stuff to add because they removed the farming tag from it. So it just doesn't fit into the actual farming comp. It really only fits in dogs. I mean, let's put it this way, if I'm going to run this, I may as well run this if I'm in a farming comp. You know what I mean? You know, this just happens to give you the stats immediately, whereas this needs to die. And that might mean your good boy or something dies before it, which you don't want to happen. So, and this actually just gives more stats anyway. So yeah, you just can't retain enough food on this thing without a pure dog build with Neros. You just can't get enough, typically, from only Haymaker for this to be worth it, in my opinion. That being said, it's still a prime unit if you're in a Nero build. It's just I'm not in a Nero build that much anymore because they frickin' gutted the unit. I don't know. Did they gut it? They certainly punched it to the gut. This teeters between S and A, I would say. I think it's probably a S, even though I think Good Boy is typically a better card. It isn't that much better, and they fit into the same type of comps, typically. They both have a lot of flexibility. I guess one advantage of King Arthur is it has better initial stats, so it actually just sort of drops in and does immediate work. Like if I were to get King Arthur from Fortuna, that's definitely better than Good Boy. So I don't know, it's pretty good. Both of the units are scammable, unfortunately, but I think King Arthur's more scammable because it can get scammed by just any flying unit or fire mage, and then obviously the Tailor scams both of them just the same. Celestial T scams both of them just the same. But there's a lot more ways to actually scam the King Arthur, I guess. But not enough for me to drop it out of S. It is a pretty damn good unit. And pretty devastating to go against. Guinevere is a unit that has definitely gotten its fair share of nerfs. It's usable. It's just kind of worse than Merlin most of the time. You have to have a lot of boosts going on for this unit to matter, and I just don't find myself using those. And usually the times I end up with Guinevere now, it's just I'm using it in place of Merlin, and it, especially if I have like the boost treasures, like this one, boost the whole front row. But I don't know. It technically can earn you more stats than a Merlin, but a lot has to be moving for that to happen. I would just typically prefer Merlin. But I've ran it in like my farmer comp before. It's just 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a Merlin and not a Guinevere. She's alright. But yeah, like I've gotten her from Fortuna before and it just sucks. Whereas like if I get a Merlin off Fortuna, then I'm fine. That's A-okay. Just kind of shows their base power level, I guess. We haven't ranked Merlin yet, but I might as well just because it's kind of similar timing there to all of this. Definitely S. This unit has surprised me with how little it's been nerfed over the years. Like, to me, it just seemed redundant with both Guinevere and Lady of the Lake. But this unit just sort of remains. It's such a versatile unit, and it's good in almost every single build in the game. I can't think of a build that actually just can't straight up use Merlin. I mean, I wouldn't really use it in Scam, but at the same time, you could. I wouldn't, but you could. I mean, you still, at the end of the day, you're resummoning stuff in front of it. It's getting stats. But yeah, it's S tier. It makes all of your boosts better. It's like great with that. It's great with itself. It's really good with this. It's God tier with this. Like, I'm not kidding you. I can always tell the people that don't really know how to play fluffs when their fluff boards don't have a Merlin. I'm telling you right now, without a Merlin, you will never reach the fluff numbers that I reach. You could have as many blue fluffs as you want. It will never give you, like, you need all of it together. But trust me, the Merlin, do not ignore running the Merlin on your fluff boards, because your scaling is like double as, even sometimes more than double as good, simply from running Merlin. It's definitely worth playing down 1 fluff on your board for it, sometimes even 2, depending on what your makeup is. One second. But yeah, anyway, Merlin good. Oh my god, the total length on this video. We're not going to talk about that. And I still have so many to go. Oh, by the way, I think I'll probably reply in the comments by the time this video is out, but someone had pointed out that the 2-cost parrot was not in this list. And I definitely have to rate that, because we'll just pretend that this is the actual 2-cost parrot. I mean, it is a parrot. And it's getting buffed. I'm fine with it getting buffed. I don't necessarily think it absolutely needed it. It just helps that it will at least counter boosted, whatchamacallits, Prince boosted things. I find it to be A tier. I think it's one of the best 2-drops in the game, personally. The only downside is it doesn't deal with specifically the prince, but everything else, it basically 1-for-1s or it 2-for-1s if it's going to kill a booster. But more importantly, there's just a lot of heroes that can make use of this thing. It's already okay as a base unit. Sometimes you can make use of the actual sleigh. A lot of times I don't care about that portion of it. But I don't know. It's really nice to it's the only way to have access to the backline in the early game, and it every now and then you can get extra scaling out of it, and it's really good on stuff like Demeter and whatnot that can continue to scale it, or if you get like the Slay treasure that has +2 attack on death for Slay units. So I do actually like the parrot quite a lot, the 2-cost one. This unit is gone from the game, thankfully. Very glad to see that unit gone. I guess I would go like B or C with the mirror on the wall. This one is very hard to judge, right? It's like if you're facing... You'll know when it's good or not. And it's properly... Unlike T, I feel like it's properly costed. It's like only at this point in the game do you determine if you need a mirror or not. The only build that just uses it generally would be Scam. Otherwise, it's a tech card. And it's an entrance, so there are ways to actually make it pop off. But again, it really depends on your opponent. If you're facing dwarfs, for example, it'll be good no matter where you put it. It's async, so you also have a higher chance to actually just have it, you know, hit a unit that's big. It's probably worse in sync. But in async, I think it's a fine card. I don't really add it that often, to be honest, though, because a lot of the strongest builds just don't have big units. It's meta-dependent, right? Like, if dwarfs and fluffs rule the game, then this is a god tier. But if stars and summons and scam rule the world, which that kind of is the case now, then it's not so good. And I can't even recall off the top of my head if it's good against stealth, because I can't remember how the entrance ordering procs. It's good. It's a good card, though. It's not a great one on Fortuna, I know that. Multi. It's somewhere between S and A. They added range to it, which makes up for the whatever you call it, Black Smith losing it, I guess. I don't know. Is it S or A? It's definitely more situational, I feel, than Admiry, but it has a higher ceiling for sure. The fact that it itself is ranged, and also if you have Vampire daggers and or Blacksmith, it just continues to grow in value. I do find that I'm generally more satisfied to find an Admiry, though. Like, the first one I want to find is Admiry. I might pump it to A just because of that. There are some builds also, say you are dwarves, but say you didn't find dagger or a blacksmith, then this is no good. So all in all, I think I do bump it to A while Admiry remains in the S. But I could see an argument for S for multi as well. That's where the dwarfs come together, is then. But I think Admiry is the real big thing there. So for Uberon, I think he's between S or A. The thing is, he's really not that necessary if you're using Star Child, I would say, and your Star Child has scaling. But the ideal star build does use it. Does use Oberon. And ideally you actually use Bluebell, but also ideally you use Puck to make more stars after you've shot your initial set of stars. All of these ideal scenarios need Oberon. So I suppose he is S. He's also unyielding, so he can be ran in the back line pretty well. It's usually where you'd want to be, I think. Stars have a lot of units that want to be in the back, though, honestly. Dandelion, maybe Titania. But, yeah, and it also seems to be kind of like the Cat Queen. I feel like it's just one of those units that, like, I have never had problem finding a Merlin. I have never had that much problem finding a King Arthur or a Good Boy, or even a Blue Puff. I have had hella fucking problems trying to find Cat Queen in particular, but also Oberon. I don't know what it is. I guess it's just variance. I'll have my conspiracy theories, though, that the weight is off on those. Prince John no longer exists. They really do need a unit that interacts with royals, but this unit was just weirdly designed. Like, there aren't really any evil royals, really, and it only triggered off evil units, and it didn't give permanent stats, so I don't really know what the thought with that is. But I would like to see this unit return. The idea is fun. I think they just needed to make it. If they just made it permanent stats, it's still weird as a 6-drop, I guess. But I could see it kind of working if it was like a 5-drop. Because the thing is, you wouldn't be playing this guy with royals, but you'd be using it to scale a like transition into royals, which could be kind of neat. It'd be like a greed card that you could play on 5, maybe even 4. 4 would be interesting, because you could actually run Romeo and Juliet simultaneously while just having a few evil units on board. Might be too powerful then. But yeah, it was just an ill-fated unit. Now, Phoenix is a card that has continued to grow on me, but I still don't think it's amazing. It is good, though. It's between B or A. It's certainly better than Mirror Fairy, I think. It's certainly better than Archangel. Just in a general sense, obviously. I think in the build that... The problem with Phoenix is there's not really a build that pops off as well as these cards, though, you know? It's just a worse version of King Arthur and Good Boy. That's the way I look at it. It's like Good Boy will always get you more stats in most builds, so will King Arthur. The Phoenix, though, if you're desperate and you don't have time to look for those other units, any build that would use them typically uses Phoenix well. Also, you're usually wanting to run both these together, I find. If you were to find Good Boy and not King Arthur, you could definitely settle for a Phoenix. It also is good in the stealth build, so it's pretty versatile. I suppose I'll bump it to A. Yeah. It's either that or I bump it to B and I bump both these to C. Which honestly feels more accurate. Let's do that. I think that's actually more accurate. Because really I'm not taking these units that often. Or this one even. But I'm taking this definitely more often than I take those. As I look through all of this, I definitely take Phoenix more than most of the stuff in the C. But I definitely don't take it more than the B tier stuff. I mean, how could I put it above this when I would never really take Phoenix if I don't already have that? And it's not even the ideal unit in front of that. It's like the 3rd or 4th unit that I would want after these two. I think the main problem is like, you know, these just give more stats. You know, they're affecting more units, and even if they only affect one unit, it's still about the same level of stats. And they can go on to other units that might be ranged, You know, these can go on to unyielding or ranged units. This can't. This just goes right back to itself. I guess if you were... And it also isn't a dying breath, whereas these are. So, you know, Anubis, or more commonly the double dying breath item, interact with these amazingly, whereas there's nothing like that for Phoenix. You kind of wish that it was a dying breath. But I guess it would be weird because if you doubled it, it would like summon two of itself, which wouldn't be good in lore. But still, it's something. It's just never the ideal unit in any scenario. It's always like the less than stellar option, but it is still okay. Shadowcat, I don't know. For async, I probably don't like it that much. If I get it from Fortuna, it's a good unit. I mean, it's pretty good there. Like, you can run that with the Muddy Crabs and stuff. Probably C, I don't know. The thing is, like, other than Fortuna, I'm only taking it if I already have, like, this, because in async, I'm not taking Matt out of order. And I'm not going to take this out of order either. I would have to take this first. Then I would take that. Then I would take Matt. That's kind of why I don't end up in stealth that much in async. So hard to really judge this one. I mean, I'm almost never buying it, but it's not like it's a bad card at what it does. I've probably bought Celery Tea more. And honestly, as much as I think Celery Tea is underwhelming, we're going to bump it to C. It doesn't belong to be there with Try My Net and whatever this fucking card that doesn't even deserve to have its name remembered is. It is probably more in line with these. It's a tech card. It does what it does. It just doesn't do its job that well, I feel. But then again, I have ended up with this on my winning board probably more than most of these C tier cards even. So definitely more than the D tier cards. I could even argue Celery Tea to B, honestly. I don't think I've used it any less than Phoenix. I don't think I've used it any less than any of these cards other than this one. This one I've used fucking quite a lot. But I feel like this represents green puff to a certain extent as well. We'll leave it at C. I don't want people looking at this list and thinking, oh, I'm going to like grab Celery Tea a bunch. It's a very specific card for very specific needs. Sherlock Holmes, I suppose it's good at what it does, but what it does is fuel a less than ideal build. It's like the shit, like I said before, Hunter is just a shittier version of Stars. Sure is good at what it does, though. It's a lot better than Van Helsing in the current state. And it's a lot better than, I think it's better than Watson and Gretel to a degree. I mean, it's not good if you don't already have those cards, is the thing. I guess maybe it's good if you get the 50 attack treasure, which is going away anyway. I could honestly argue S on it. It is S tier for Hunter builds. Yeah, you can get Double Dying Breath. It's the card that has escaped the nerf bat, the only one from Hunters, and honestly I don't know that it should not be nerfed, but because everything else has been nerfed, let's just leave it alone, you know? It's always arguably been the best hunter card, to a degree. I mean, it's the thing that lets you close out games. A lot of people play hunter just to infinitely scale, which can be fun, but it's not really the way to win. You do want to, like, stop the game from going on too long. So Cabinet got a gigantic nerf, and it's still pretty okay at what it does. Probably A. It's definitely better than a Phoenix, I feel. At the end of the day, it's the only thing in the game that summons itself 3 times, even if it doesn't do it twice. Or even if it doesn't create 2 things when it's unupgraded. When it's upgraded, it still does that. It's really good with cats. But it's usable with some other builds. It's usable as a tech piece into stars. It's going to eat up hopefully 3 stars, usually 2, I find. It's probably going to get attacked before the stars fire. But either way, it's, especially if you upgrade it, it can eat up the whole damn stars. So, problem is, if you're not cats, are you really going to invest that much in Cabinet? Because it's not really good for your board outside of cats, other than being a tech against stars. It's even a liability at some points into some builds, but I don't know. It's alright. It's, in the context of cats, very good. Not as good as Cat Queen, though. Like I said, you can win without Cabinet. Can't really win without Cat Queen, unless you get the weird nut draw treasures that I had that one time. Flounder, I think, is S. They've massively buffed that unit. It was still okay in the dog meta. It was an unideal unit, I think, but it was similar to Sherlock Holmes in a sense. It was like a power spike to try to close out the game. But now it's just a freaking cornerstone of the farmer build. Like I said, the 3 units that you need to really get it going are Haymaker, Flounder, and Milkwoman. And then you just start adding pieces like, you know, this or that or that or that. And then you just start going to town. What can I say? It's ranged. It adds a ton of stats to the board. It makes all of your farmer units retain a ton of food. Even though I think it's bugged. I did the calculation. Like, when it's not upgraded, it seems bugged. But we won't really get into that. It is capped at 100%, so don't believe the lies when it says it does 140%. You can't actually go above the cap, unfortunately. Kind of wish you could. This unit has been deleted from the game. It was basically just a shittier, darker Frankenstein. So Titania, I'm rating this on the current patch. I'm going to say C. I think in the future patch it's going to be a good unit. But the thing is, it's just a shittier version of Dandelion, and it's a 6 cost, you know. The only advantage it really has over Dandelion is that it can be placed anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the right behind your star units, and that's the only advantage in the current patch. Because it's not an aura, it's not a boost, so it has no upside. I can't put a double boost item on it. I can't use a Merlin with it. I can't use the double boost treasure with it. None of these things actually make it better. But at the end of the day, it's something that can be used with the arguably best build. And honestly, I don't see stars being bad in the future. They're trying to nerf them, but they're also buffing them. It's like they made Titania better because right now the problem with her is, aside from just being a worse Dandelion, you know, keep in mind they're just going to remove Dandelion, so she'll be a bit more unique in what she does, you know, doubling the stars. But, you know, that aside, even then, you can't go above 7 stars with every single star unit in this game other than Puck. But that's changing in the future patches. In the future patches, both Bluebell and Starchild can summon above 7 stars. So Titania becomes a bit better at that point. So I suspect she'll shoot up to like A. Maybe even S, because she's unique in what she does, right? Even in the current patch, if Dandelion never existed, she would jump up to like A or S because she would be unique in what she does. Even beyond the whole 7-star thing, she would be almost doubling your output of stars, so it's pretty good. But C tier in the current patch because, again, a 4-cost unit does what she does infinitely better. And then poor Nero, one of the, arguably the best unit in the patch before this, but I'm going to go C tier now. It's not unusable, it's just they nerfed it so hard. It went from like a, what was it, 6-4 to a 3-3. You know, that's half the attack. The health is about the same, I guess. Still less. Still a lot less when you figure that this thing is usually doing between 6 and 7 procs. You know, if you're flipping between slot 1 and 7. So it's like, you know, especially if you have double entrance treasures and whatnot, it affects the upgraded version. It's just a compounding effect. Not unusable, but it's like, why would I do that when the Flounder route is so much better? The Flounder Farmer route is just so much better. Maybe if the unit was good, then it synergizes Good Boy a bit better, but because it's evil, I just can't see purposely wanting to fit it into any of my farming builds unless I'm about to die. That's essentially the only time I take it. If I'm about to die, then I'll take Nero. And that's kind of C tier below for me. It's like once you get to level 6, anything above, especially like A or S, needs to be things that I am ideally looking for, you know? Like, when I look at the stuff in A and S, these are things that win games. You know, Flounder wins games, Sherlock wins games, Oberon wins games, Merlin definitely wins games. All of these win games. This wins games, this wins games, this wins games, this wins games, this wins games. These, and I evaluate, the lower that I get, the less I'm just looking for survival instead of winning games. But I would say that some of the 5-drops win games too. I mean, all 3 of these. So it is what it is. It is what it is. We're almost done. I think I go D on Van Helsing in the context that it's a 6-drop. I have had the rare game where it works, but gosh, it just got gutted. You know, it only shoots with 40% of your hero attack, only 3 times no matter how many attacks your hero has. Then 6 if you can upgrade it. I guess you can double, double Death Breath it, but I should also mention that to a certain extent the symbol of unity change, I'm trying to think what the current version of symbol unity does. Does it? It only does auras, right? I can't remember. Well, either way, if it does, it ignores fluffs anyway. But I was going to say the old symbol of unity was decent with hunters as well, because both Sherlock and Van Helsing interacted with the Purple Puff. I definitely had builds where I would Purple Puff Van Helsing, and it was hilarious. And I'd already have like 6 attacks on my hero anyway. But yeah, I mean, it's not F because it is technically usable. I really think it's pretty bad though. You have to have so much hero attack for this to actually be relevant. And it only cares about the flat hero attack. It doesn't take into factor your number of attacks. So it's just not very good. It was a unit that did not need to be nerfed. I'm pretty adamant about that. It definitely did not need to be nerfed, and I would like it. It's pointless to unnerf it at this point because all of the hero attack increasing treasures have been removed. Because without Van Helsing being what it is, then there's no point to having those treasures. So it's kind of a chicken egg scenario. You'd have to undo all of those changes to bring it back to a point that makes sense. And that's just never going to happen. Like I said, I stay out of the fucking... I'm going to wash my hands clean of any balance talk from here on out on the Discord because I just get fucking shit on every goddamn time I try to bring anything up these days. Like, I'm serious. Like, I feel like some of them are probably legit. I do have some hot takes, but there's other ones where I'm like one dude was like, "Oh man, Slay is almost too good." I'm like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Like get the fuck out of here. You're trolling." Like somebody tried to claim that like Slay is almost too good. Like get the fuck out of here. You know that's a fucking lie. Shut the fuck up. Anyway, Hecate, however you say that name. Probably A tier. Not a whole lot of upside necessarily, but it's pretty straightforward unit. A bit boring of a unit, but it's pretty straightforward. You're either mages or you're not. You're never taking it outside of it. But there's some weird upside. I don't know if it'll get patched out, but technically, if you doppelganger it, it doubles its stats, the copied unit. I don't really think it should work that way, but it does. Because other units don't do that. Like if I double a fluff, it won't double those stats. But yeah, whatever. Or if I double a Gretel, it won't double its stats that way. But for this unit, it does. So I consider it a bug. It seems inconsistent with the other stuff. But yeah, whatever. Either way, I guess if that doppelganger thing is patched out, it still has the double aura treasure, magic scarf, which is okay with it. Not much else to it though. You can't even really like true love kiss it to something else because the stats don't persist. So, but it's good. It's a unit with health in a build that lacks health, so it fills a spot. But I couldn't give it an S. It's not like... It's not really... It's really good the earlier you get it. Let's put it that way. But there's not a whole lot of upside with it. And the final one here... I'm trying to think if there's any that we've missed. Because they're just not in here. I know we got the parrot. Slay Moon or Moon Witch or whatever. Moon Bitch. So obviously it's broken on beta, but we're not basing this tier list off beta. We're just basing it on the current patch on async at high MMR. And as much as I hate on Slay, this is like the only fucking unit that's worth anything. If you have a Slay build together, this is how you top it off. And it gets a lot of stats. Granted, they're not really permanent, so it can still be scammed, but if it doesn't, that's why I'm putting it to B, because it's very easily scammed. But if you get your Slays, it sure will pop off. And considering the only way... Oh, this song. Okay, one second. Man, to know that that song in this playlist is followed by this one. Night and day, baby. This is like the best song on Chained Echoes. And that other one is just the worst song ever made in life. But, yeah, Slay Moon, whatever her fucking name is, Moon Bitch. She... I don't even know what I was saying. That song just ripped my soul right through my brain and ripped a hole through it. Let's let this song restore my health. Ah, yes. Thank you. Okay, what were we talking about? Slay. Yeah, I mean, it's like, even on the current patch, the rare time, I should say, not even plural, the time I was able to make Slay win, you needed the whole Exodia. So if you can imagine the whole Exodia, I had this upgraded with both of the boosting treasures. I had this upgraded. I think I even had two of them. I had this with Artemis in slot 1 with gigantic stats. I had two of these up front. So as you can imagine, and I think I had the Slay Sword as well. In that ideal nuts scenario, it actually worked. Might I mention, it still just kind of got stats that were comparable to a very middling fluff build, but at least it was enough to win me that weird game. But I suppose there have been times, like, definitely if I'm Fortuna, for example, and I get this unit, that's pretty good. It's definitely a unit, the earlier you get it, the more it can win you a fight, because it does get you stats that are well ahead of most curves that would be around the level of 5, shall we say. If you get ahead on experience, you have some Slay stuff, you can add that and you'll punish the lobby for a few rounds. And maybe you can transition to a full Slay build, but probably you can't. So I still say it's like bottom of B, but it's the only Slay unit that's decent. We're not going to count Blue Puff, because that's not really a Slay build. That's a fluff build. And fluffs are fucking legit. So that is everything. Is there any units that were not included here, I wonder? Trying to think. I don't think so, but let me know if there were some that didn't make it in for whatever reason. And maybe just talking about compositions, you can kind of look at my tier list and it already tells the story of which compositions I generally think, for me, are the most consistent. So, stars, you see Puck in the S, you see Dandelion in the S, you see Oberon and Starchild in the S. That's a lot of units for that build in the S. And then there's other ones that aren't bad either, like the Star Girl and I guess Titania. And then Bluebell. Yeah, don't forget Bluebell. Then the other one would be like farmers. You got Haymaker, you got Flounder, and then you got Hard Milk Woman, and then you got Good Boy and King Arthur, which are the main reason they're in S is because of that build, but they are just generally useful. And those to me are the two S tier builds. I don't really put anything else in the S tier, but I think I have A tier builds that are represented here as well. Like, I think Dwarf is probably A tier because of the end game strength. Just has that weak early game, but if you're a little bit better than me at finessing your way through dwarfs and items, shall we say, then maybe you can make that S tier. I don't think Cat is S tier, but I know that unit is S tier. I don't think Scam. I think Cat is B tier. I think Scam is A tier. I think it just has similar problems of dwarfs in that it can be hard to navigate your way to the end game. Sometimes it's easier. It's definitely easier for Scam to get to the end game, but Scam is very dependent on what your opponents are doing too. More so than dwarfs. Dwarfs are that way too. I mean, if your opponents are Scam, you're gonna lose as dwarfs. But with Scam, like, you just gotta hope that it's stuff that doesn't just not care about scam. Like, every now and then I will see angels in the end game. It blows my mind, but somehow they end up there. And if I'm scam, it's like game over. There's no fucking way you beat angels with scam. As long as they have archangels, of course. It has nothing to do with Angel Commander. Angel Commander sucks ass. It's all about the archangels. Hunter, I would say, is like low B, high C, even if it has an S tier unit. Fluffs, I think, is A. Fluffs are I think this is the best spot Fluffs has ever been in the game, in my opinion. They've been able to gain stats more when Slay Witch was better, but back then when Slay Witch was better, you could run anything with Slay Witch, and it was amazing. Slay, if you could believe it or not, in closed beta was hands down the best thing in the game because of the way you could multiplicatively apply Slay Witch to anything. It was ridiculous. I loved it. It was obviously had to be nerfed, but I still say it's the problem with the game is multiplicative effects in general. They're impossible to balance. We remove, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in Storybook Brawl, nothing was multiplicative. Everything was additive. So if I'm adding something to boost, I'm adding one instance of boost. If I'm adding something to an aura, I'm adding one instance of aura. In this game, it's like completely arbitrary. For instance, there's I believe an 8 gold item that says my slay triggers twice, or an extra chime or whatever. I think it says twice. The weird thing about this game is the keyword twice usually indicates that it's additive and not multiplicative, which makes no sense. But that is an additive item. All it does is give you one extra slay. It doesn't double the amount of slays. But like a Guinevere, for example, is multiplicative. You receive your boost in extra time. That doesn't mean, and that's the weird thing. Like that one's not additive, and it is multiplicative. Based on that wording, I would expect the exact opposite. But with Guinevere, it's like you just literally take every boost received and multiply it by 2. Instead of just adding one on top, to the current boosts. But I could get pretty far down that tangent. That's another battle I can't win. Everyone's fine with the multiplicative scaling being all over the place. I'm just whining at that point, though. It's not that bad. I mean, it's fine. There is a certain level of fun to it. I'm not like 100% against it, if I'm being honest. I just think that it would be easier if nothing was multiplicative. But to be honest, it is kind of cool to see the numbers get gigantic. I just wish there was a decision made, though, like, is that the direction the game should go in or not? Because if it is, then every single archetype should be able to do that to some degree. Other than scam, I guess. Because scam is just a reaction to that. But yeah, I guess it's like, because here's the thing, you'll notice those S tier builds, they always get to those 1,000 levels. The fluffs get to like 3,000 to 5,000 stats each. My farmer stuff ends up with that after all is said and done. The stars themselves get to those numbers. Though honestly, with stars, you're probably just closing games out fast. I wouldn't actually say that stars typically rely on getting gigantic numbers, in my experience.
But the other, like the B tier builds, don't really get there. Like Cats doesn't ever get to like 1000 level stats. It'd be pretty rare to do that. Sometimes it can happen. Hunters, I guess, get there. It just takes them really long to get there. And it's only on a few units. The Hunter builds, half your board is support units, typically. And then maybe eventually, if it goes on long enough, you could transition to mainly Hansels and Gretels, but those are the only units that are actually going to have stats on your board. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about the units. We can go over the other stuff next, which I guess we can do heroes. I feel like I got a pretty good idea of async heroes, because that's something I actually ran my numbers on. Granted, still, the stuff I don't pick that much, we'll have to take with a grain of salt, because if I didn't pick it much, it's usually because I had a few bad experiences, and I just evaluated them as being bad and avoided them like the plague. But that doesn't always mean that they are bad. It just means that I didn't have good experiences with them. And yeah. Anyway, as always, until next time.